Hi, good evening. Welcome everyone to the TNT show. You know, it's been another great day for British democracy. You may have seen today's polls for the independence movement and for the SNP. They're terribly, terribly encouraging. Support for independence, I guess, is at an all-time high, if not very close to it. And SNP support is very high, rising too. So, to no one's surprise, Scottish Labour chooses today to announce its total and utter opposition to a referendum on independence. My word, superb timing. Hi, I'm John Drummond, and I'm your host for the next 60 minutes. Thanks for joining us this evening. We have yet another great guest. I know I say that every week, but it's true every week. We have another great guest tonight, and I'm really excited that he's here with us. Stay tuned to hear about being a theatre and movie producer, as well as being a hit on social media. Tonight, the nation talks to Gareth Wardell, better known to some of you as Grousebeater. How are you, Gareth? How are you and the family coping with the pandemic?
Oh, the pandemic. That's got panic in it, hasn't it, that word? Well, luckily, both my wife and I are freelancers, so we work from home. So lockdown didn't really trouble us all that much. Managed to get down to the shops to get produce. Plus, I've been trying to build this garden in which I've got a few raised beds built where we could plant the vegetables. So we've survived reasonably well, not fallen out. Moments of short temper, the kind of thing you get at close quarters with another human being that irritates the hell out of you.
Yeah, so, you're speaking for the whole of Scotland when you say that.
Absolutely. Surviving reasonably well. Although
that's good.
The weather's been good and the weather's been atrocious. And I hear it's going to be atrocious again tomorrow.
So I got that. That's why tonight's show is so important for people to get a sense of joy. And tell us a little bit about your background, because you've got a very interesting background, Gareth.
Don't let the bourgeois appearance fool you. I'm from a broken home. My grandparents were highly pioneering musicians. Grandfather set up the Musicians' Union in Scotland. My mother, I'm half Sicilian. My mother is Irish, Scottish. She was born here. My grandfather was Irish from County Mayo. Unfortunately, my mother married a guy that she wasn't really in tune with after Churchill sent my father back home to Italy. Things sort of fell apart after that. He was what you would call the salt of the earth, my stepfather, but not in any way artistic or creative, which my mother was. And as I said, the other family was. So I ran away lots of times from home, and eventually one of my mother's sisters started to look after me, my guardian. So if I am capable of any kind of caring, love, or affection for human beings, it came from her. Although she was terribly old-fashioned in her day. You know, if any sex scene came on television, the television was switched off instantly, that kind of thing. She was very old-fashioned that way. So, of course, that always made me, when you're young, it always makes you curious. As for the rest of my life, being from, run away from a broken home and a bleak childhood, automatically it leads lots of young people to go towards the theatre. It's quite an attractive sort of thing where you can dress up and be someone else. But I wanted to direct, and so went to the Glasgow School of Art. It's a conservatoire now, I think it's called. I don't know why they called it that, but in my day it was the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama. And then went into professional theatre and got some directing work. Worked for the Royal Shakespeare Company a short time. And then for some reason I decided I wanted academic qualifications. So I got teaching and lecturing qualifications distinction. One of the few times that word has been attached to my name. And remembered that after I'd done some teaching in Glasgow schools, I noticed that these young people that had all this energy, and some of them clearly talented, had nowhere to go. So I did what anyone else would do. I decided that there should be a national theatre for young people aged 18 to about 21 or 22. And I raised the money to get it off the ground. And brought in Professor Mulrine, who was head of English at Edinburgh University, and brought in Vision people, Equity, the Actors Union, to a big meeting in Glasgow. And then I read my paper, lifted my head up after about, I think it was maybe 50 minutes. I thought it would be a 10-minute little talk, telling them why I thought this was important for Scotland, to try and nurture the talent and ability was here. Drama covering everything. Music, writing, the technical side, the performance art side. And the head of the School of Drama, an Englishman, said, well, of course, Gareth's idea of a national theatre for new young talents, all very well, but it needs a special person to lead such an institution. And I've never forgotten this moment, because I didn't know what to say to that, even though I had the checks from various international trusts to set it up. But Professor Mulrine, who was sitting just above me to my left, looked over to the head of the school, the drama school, and said, Mr. Argent, the mere existence of a paper on the subject presupposes the existence of such a person. And I had a terrible mixture of pride and fear. Pride because he meant me, but fear because I'd never, ever had an intention to run such an institution. I just wanted to see it started. And that's what happened. I went to the pub and started to weep and tell my friends I knew nothing about Scottish history. I'll be cut out first go. And that then led on to 7 years working with young people. Most of them are sort of famous now and made lots of money. Forgot my telephone number. And then when I decided that time would come, I couldn't relate to young people anymore. They were just ego-ridden, little, pimply, vain human beings. It was time for me maybe to go back to adult concerns. And so I had a misstep. I got invited by BBC to become head of the youth programs over in Ireland. I hated what I saw and heard there. I asked to be brought back and work in BBC Scotland, which they allowed me to do, and I disliked that even more. And then one day I had the joy of walking into my head of programs and saying, I'm leaving. He said, what are you going to do? You're married with kids. I said, well, I've just been given £2.5 million to make a political movie from Channel 4. And so that's a long-winded way of telling you, why you're interviewing me now. After that, I did what every other ambitious person has done in Scotland. I had to leave Scotland to find work. We don't make films in Scotland, really. We go to see them. So I went over to Los Angeles and for about 10 months in each year, but I didn't leave my house in Scotland. But it was a good time and it was a difficult time. And then I came back in 2013 when I knew we were going to have our independence referendum, because I thought there's no way I'm going to miss that. And that's me here now, forever, I think.
Tell us a little bit more about your family, about your wife and your children. What do you do?
I'm married to one of Scotland's greatest painters and master printmakers, Barbara Ray, Dr. Barbara Ray, who's a Royal Academician, a Royal everything, etcher, where you name it, goes off the end of the envelope. In fact, she's so famous, I have to walk behind her like the Duke of Edinburgh. And you might think that that's absolute nonsense, but it's absolutely true. She is considered by some of the world's top painters as a great colorist. And she is a woman who refuses to be called a female artist. She says, don't demean me. I am a painter and an artist. The female is redundant.
Yeah.
So that's her. One daughter runs a very successful Montessori school, art school, where young people discover solutions to problems and how to and themselves through the arts, self-exploration.
Yeah.
And the other one, the youngest one, who looks 100% Italian, she's 6 feet tall, Nora, who played Mary Queen of Scots in the London production, and now a theatre director. She's a chip of the old block. And she's down there now, but she hopes to get back to give her dad a good squeeze and a hug. I hope not ask me for any more money until I can sell something else that I've written. That's really it. I come from a musical side of the family, but I can't play music. I can recognize a composer in 2 bars,
yeah,
even if it's a piece of his music or her music I've never heard before. I can't read music, and my grandfather stuck a fiddle in my hand when I was about 5 and whipped it out again. I said, "The boy, it will not be musical, but his creativity will come out some other way." In fact, when I was at school, when I was at first year in secondary school, my report said, "Gareth Wardell is a chap who his mind wanders on all occasions and all classes. He has imagination which should be curbed at all costs." So I got that one down. But I was top in my primary school. And the teacher said, "All right, Gareth, you've come tops at final year in primary school. What book would you like? How about the Beano Annual?" Or she went through these comic book things. I said, "No, I would like the novel Moby Dick." She said, "Well, Moby Dick," she said, "but there's no illustrations in that." I said, "Don't mind, miss. I just love the story." So it was all there.
Yeah.
And at secondary school, I didn't do very well. You know, when you come from a broken home and you lack confidence, which I did, as well as many others, it's sometimes difficult to feel that even if you're good at something, it'll take you somewhere. I was asked by the woodwork teacher, "What do you want to do?" I said, I don't know. I'd like to go to university." "You have to be intelligent to go to university, Gareth." Well, yeah, I suppose so, sir. I suppose you're right. Years later, I saw him at the Tupper Leaf Walk walking down, and your ego says, "I'm going to tell that son of a, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind, for undermining my confidence." But there was just this wee humpy back guy, hold his collar together. Yeah. I thought, no, just let him walk past. Yeah. I also met my, I don't know if you want to hear this anecdote, but I'll tell you, I met my primary teacher years later. Now, you and your viewers have got to try and imagine that I have dark hair and long, dark beard.
No problem.
And when I was outside the school, children were nudging each other at the bus stop, and I knew they were trying to ask me something. "No, you ask him. No, you ask him." So I said, "What is it you want to ask me?" And this child said, "Sir, do you know you look like Jesus?" And most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me. Now, I realize I look like the Turin Shroud, but you have to try and imagine that I looked like Jesus when I met my primary teacher and her daughter walking towards me. And I shifted on the pavement to let them pass, and she stopped in front of me. She said, "I know who you are." I said, "I don't understand. We met. I'm your primary teacher." This beautiful blonde lady, and her daughter was even more beautiful. I said, "Miss McDonald." She said, "That's me, Gareth." A few more pleasantries, and then she said, "I'll tell you a little secret, Gareth. When you came to my class, you always made sure you got a seat and a desk at the front." And I said, "Why?" She said, "So you could stare at my legs." And she was absolutely right. As an adult, I always had an eye for a well-turned heel, long legs. So there's true stories for you. Used to look like Jesus, now look like the Turin Shroud, but that's the time.
Maybe a touch of Billy Connolly.
Oh, God. That's got worse. I worked with Billy, in an Amnesty International charity show, which I produced at the Usher Hall during the festival. He was the last guest. And afterwards, when I was taking my gift of a framed version of the poster for the show, I caught him staring at me down the hall. I mean, really staring at me. And I knew immediately what I was thinking. I said, "I used to be dark-haired, Billy." And it happened recently. I was in an open-top car, dark glasses on the slope around the Bank of Scotland and the Mound going downhill, and the lights are at red. That way you get to Waverley, that way you go down to the Mound, to the Academy.
Yeah.
And there was a a bar on my left with people sitting outside, and I heard, Billy, I'm over here, Billy. And I was praying, change the lights. God, I'll believe in you if you change those lights from red to green. And she kept shouting this girl. And I just kept the dark shades, and I turned slowly and said, I'm on my holidays now, these a break. She burst out laughing. So I've had that a few times. Even when I was in hospital recently, the next door neighbour in the bed said, has anyone ever told you you look like Billy Connolly? No, never. How are you feeling?
I'll tell you what, we'll come back to your story in a second. We've had a question. And we can come back to this from Butterflies Rising on Periscope. And the question is, what's the most important thing we should prioritise in an independent Scotland?
So that's presuming that we have independence.
Of course.
Right. What should we prioritise? That's a really complicated question. I would have thought the kind of society that we need to build, ethics, morals, an open society, look at our justice system, look at our education system and see if we can be a bit more radical in the way we teach young children. So I know that sounds a bit Presbyterian, but if you're Scots, the Presbyterianism squats on your shoulder like a frog, like a toad. You can never get rid of it. But it would have to be how we want to treat each other and what kind of inclusive society we should be forming.
Yeah.
At the moment, I sometimes get the impression that some people want it to be exclusive, but that's a different story. So, morals, ethics, and indeed, what is it that we have to do to create opportunity for happiness? Yeah. Happiness is one of the least, in my view, thought about attributes for human nature. Yeah. In a democracy isn't about making everybody equal. It's about offering equal opportunity. I know you've heard that before, but what I mean by that is not everybody can be equal. There are some people who are not ambitious and don't want it. There's some people by their predicament who are disadvantaged some way. And there's probably a tiny percentage who you can never actually cope with in a democracy. So nobody should think that overnight there's some kind of nirvana. You know what our opponents keep telling us, oh, you're talking about heaven on earth, that won't ever happen. Well, no, nobody's talking about heaven and earth. But democracy, it is a system which does its best to provide the best for the majority. And it's up to governments to try and spread that across all societies and all cliques. Yeah. So happiness would be one of my priorities.
That's very profound, if you don't mind me saying so. I know you have a terminal condition, Gareth. Would you like to talk about that?
You mean intelligence?
No, that's my terminal condition.
Well, nature gave me everything. Perhaps it's that, as it is with mongrel dogs, they don't get the same ailments as the pure breeds. So I'm half and half, and I've had remarkable health. And if the sun comes out for 5 minutes, my skin tones dark brown immediately. Yep. And I used to be able to leap over a tall building in a single bound. Or as my wife said when she first met me, run up this hill in front of me and come all the way back down again. You weren't even out of breath. I thought, you just wanted me to go for your shopping. So it was a bit of a shock to discover, recently, not only did I have cancer, it was a rare and incurable form. See, I'm that kind of special person that I get blessed with that. And the cancer is a virus. It stays in your body. So no matter which bits they cut out when you find it, it just waits. The virus hangs around and waits till your immune system lowers. So There we are, tall, swimmer's shoulders, strong lungs, not a smoker, can run up huge hillsides and back again without being out of breath to impress the woman that he was in love with. And the cancer is the tiniest thing you've ever seen. It's like a pearl of tapioca with a little black dot on the top. So my time is limited. As I said in an essay recently, for this is not too morbid, we're all dying in one way or another. You know, we start small, we start tiny, we grow big, we procreate, and then we get small again, get tiny. It's a bit of a circular existence, but that's the way of it. And that damn cancer will just wait and strike. My grandfather, Patrick Riley, he died at 84, and that was even after a hansom cab had run over his stomach when he was in his mid-30s, you know. But as you get older, the wound opens up again. It troubles you at later life because you become overweight, not got enough exercise. And my mother, God bless her, who never ate a damn thing, as thin as a stick of celery, and a chain smoker, died only a few years ago at 92. Yeah. So I'm a bit disappointed that I am more than likely never to reach my 80s. But I keep using the word but. The only time it bothers me is when I feel pain and when I wake up in the morning and realize what my condition is. But, you know, I've led a terrific life so far and still work to do. And there are people out there who are suffering, who are not sitting in front of you and giving an interview, you know, with a nice little glass of Jura. I've not been paid for this advert, just to let you know. Incidentally, the wonderful writer Clive James, remember him, who died recently? Terrific writer, the first television critic to tackle sports commentators. You know, the ones who said, and she's using all her energy to swim ahead through the water, and you know, as opposed to swim backwards or sink. He had any number of ailments in the last 10 years of his life, including diabetes. But if you looked at him carefully, he was particularly bald. You would see all the brown patches, and he used to make regular 2 or 3 month visits back to his own home country, Australia. So these debilitating illnesses he had didn't kill him. Yeah. And melanoma killed him. Yeah. And my cancer is a melanoma, but it's the one just under the skin, not the one on the top. It just sits quietly on the muscle or on the subcutaneous fat, in my case. Right. Underneath, the flesh underneath, you have to get X-rayed, you know, a CAT scan, and if they spot it, they'll try and put you under a knife and flick it out until it appears again. Right. Is that all you need to know?
Thank you for sharing, as they say in the best Hollywood circles. No, seriously, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to go back to some of the questions, if I may, because we're getting loads of questions, Gareth. Okay. Reg Tate on Facebook asks, how do you see the political structure after independence? Can something be formed that Scots will have confidence in?
Political structure, I wonder what you mean. Well, the unionist parties quite obviously can't be unionist parties anymore. One of the few, if not the only country in the world in which we actually pay politicians to preach to us and scorn us and tell us that we should be governed by our neighbour state and we should be like our neighbour state. We should emulate them in every way, including our culture. So they would have to reform themselves into a party that puts Scotland's interests first. As for the Scottish National Party, well, it would lose its core reason for existence. And it too would have to reform and rethink. I've had a feeling for the past 2 or 3 years that somewhere at a meeting in the SNP, the hierarchy with their advisors were told, here's what we should do. We should show we are fit to govern. Now, that seems to me laudable, a noble cause. And to some extent, not all, they've done that. They've certainly shown that they have more talent than the opposition parties, which are in complete disarray and ineffectual. So the SNP would have to rethink what its role is and find out what it wants to do for Scotland.
Yeah.
I don't know, it might come up with some radical policies which it hitherto has not been able to do whilst under the thumb of Westminster.
Yeah. I wrote a piece in the Constitution column of the Sunday National addressing that point last week, because it seems to me the smart people in both the Labour Party and also the Conservatives are bound to be seriously considering a split, because the reality is that whoever splits early, for example, in the Conservative and Unionist Party, and discards the Unionists and said, we're just plain Conservatives, and we will be standing in an independent Scotland as the Scottish Conservative Party with no Unionist affiliations of any kind.
Yes.
We'd still a march on the other right-wing parties that might emerge after independence. If they leave it too late, then fate will be very unkind to them. And there must be an equivalent bunch of group in the Labour Party saying, we have to break ranks soon, because if we leave it too late, what will happen is that as the SNP perhaps changes after independence, Labour and Conservative parties will be created, and we'll have none of that because we'll have no credibility.
Well, the politicians of Unionist parties are such because their future is down south. It's with West.
Oh, yeah.
You might want to call them carpetbaggers. And I see one of them, Mr. Tompkins, has decided to follow wherever the money is because it isn't going to be in Scotland. And he's opting out of the Scottish branch of the Tory party.
Yeah.
So
the sense of it is that will probably happen increasingly.
I'm sure. My wife tells me that if she had not, she arrived at art school in Edinburgh, fully formed, no heroes in the art world, admired the great Spanish painters, but she came as a Highland girl, fully formed in what she wanted to do, this kind of semi-abstract way that she paints, and in a social-political manner. Her subject matter tends to be where humankind has altered the land, or an old cottage, or a potato famine field in the west of Ireland, standing stones, or terraces in Spain where the Moors and then the Spanish have planted their vines, grapevines. And she tells me that had she not early on gone to London and got an exhibition immediately, she wouldn't be a Royal Academician, because the people in London would not have noticed that. I never did that. I went to London and hated it. The gum and the urine stuck to my soles of my shoes, and I spent 3 weeks living in the back of a camper van in this garage that was open at nights. The garage owner didn't know, and I used the toilet to shave and to wash. At nighttime, I went into the camper van and pulled the little curtains around the windows. Very resourceful. So I didn't do that. I went to America. But she did the right thing, and she's quite correct. And these politicians and the parties, they know that their future lies down south. That's where the bread is buttered. So they're just going, and even if they don't believe it, even if it, sticks in their craw to belittle Scotland, every day they go into the Holyrood chamber, they will still carry on, because the OBEs and the airmen and the directorships of the banks and all that, they're all down south. That's the lure. So even after 1707, they're still taking the bobbies. They're still accepting the gold.
I have to say, having lived in the south for over 20 years, frankly, I don't see much chance of employment for many of them. They're very low quality. No disrespect aimed at anyone in particular, but just from a managerial point of view, I just couldn't conceive of anyone giving any major credibility to some of the people I see on the opposition benches at Holyrood.
Well,
that's just my...
Richard Leonard giving a speech in the Parliament is really like watching a Boy Scout trying to get his first badge. Yeah. It's pitiful.
Yeah.
But that's the people, you see, that's the insult to Scotland. That's the people the parties in London put up here. They're not going to squander their best talent. They're going to send us, the subs. That's the ones they're going to send up here. So,
but don't you think, though, Gareth, I mean, speaking plainly, that if you field the subs, you should expect to get gubbed, because that's essentially what happens. And it seems to be a self-defeating strategy. If it is a strategy, I suspect it's somewhat accidental. But I want to ask you a question, if I may, which has come in from Mike Fennick by email. And the question he wants me to put to you is, what is your advice to ensure the Yes movement remain 100% focused on independence and remain united despite the many events which are unfolding?
I don't know what advice I dare give them. As you've noticed, I like to write. I like to, especially the essay form, which is a long form, because I can give it time to think it through and look at the flaws and the weaknesses. I'm not a pundit who has an instant opinion on everything. So I'm not sure about that. All I know is that if the SNP gets us to a state where we have the vote once more, everyone will unite automatically.
Yeah.
But time is critically short, because Boris and his gang, including his underboss Cummings and the DUP, have worked out a carefully worded strategy to take whatever teeth remain in Holyrood in our parliament, to remove them and return it to what they said it was in the first place, a sort of local council talking shop, and probably impose some kind of federalism. And I used to think that Salmond offered a kind of federalism. I mean, it was called separatism. It was depicted by our opponents, as isolationism, and us wanting to separate from Albion and its power. But there was very little in there, except in Salmond's prospectus, except we keep all the money that we earn. We decide how we spend. We have our own foreign policy. What a luxury that would be. But the borders stay open, trade stays open, and we don't secede because we keep the royal family. I know that in time to come, that might change. There are enough Republicans in Scotland to dislike that. But I never thought Salmond was trying to shut down Scotland or remove it, and push it out to the North Sea, like Iceland somewhere.
Yeah.
He was trying to say, look, we can carry on as we are, except we really don't want you interfering in our politics. I mean, when Gordon Brown, I'm diverging here, apologise to your question. When Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, he was loathed. He was loathed by his English contemporaries down there. Same as George Galloway, who's coming back here to tell the Scots to love these people who loathe us. And Gordon Brown was so embarrassed about us, he refused to ever visit the Holyrood Parliament. He never ever crossed its threshold. So I think when the time comes, what we're doing now, this debate, which will get worse, by the way, the longer it takes for us to reach the point where we can say, no, we are reinstating self-determination, like hundreds of other countries. We're not going to hate you. There are 350,000 and more English people living happily and working here in Scotland. So please, it's nothing to do with disliking English or Polish or the Chinese. I mean, the huge Italian contingency that's contributed so much to Scotland.
Exactly.
It's about civil and constitutional rights. And even when Alex Salmond was running the referendum debate, there were moments where I felt he had too much emphasis on independence for the reason that I've just said, because it allowed our opponents to portray that as separatism, isolationism. Well, England has just told Europe where to go. Who's the isolationist now?
Which sort of brings me on to a point that several people have raised. What are your thoughts on the new independence polls? I guess JD is referring on YouTube to the ones that were published today, which...
It's just the 55%.
Yeah, 55% yes, and 45%, I think, roughly no. And do you think, Jay is asking, the Westminster government will continue to ignore these polls as they continue to rise? He's rather assuming the polls will actually get better and better. But even if they stay at their present level, what's your view?
I think if Boris gave in, he would be dragged out by the hair on his head and dumped into the Thames if he agreed to a referendum. He's pitched his tent next to Nigel Farage. The Tory party has absorbed those neo-fascist ideologies, the Farage creed. The Tory party cares nothing for democracy, tried to prorogue its own parliament. It wants its parliament back as its own. I'm the guy, that put a bet in William Hill's on us winning the referendum, even as I knew while handing over the money, which I would have split between my daughters, that we would lose it. And we would lose it because we have been colonized for over 300 years. Everything, our culture, our economy, our ways of life, our traditions, our attitude. As I said earlier, if we don't sound and look like London, then... And by the way, the north of England has the same problem. They complain as well.
Yeah,
that's been going on for at least 150, 200 years. The writers in those days noticed that people who traditionally worked on the land were losing their jobs, were losing their farm, and were being absorbed into London, this great new metropolis.
Yeah.
And George Orwell spotted it and wrote about it. So there's nothing new in that. I don't know if that's answered the question. I've probably gone too generalized, but...
Well, here's I think it has, in fact. But no doubt Jay will come back and tell us if he needs some more information. Anne on Facebook is saying, it's a question about social policy now, and not necessarily about the Constitution. She said, should we have everyone retiring at 60 if we get independence? As I've had to work till 66 now, and I feel my body has worked so hard in hospitals, I'm just not fit to enjoy my retirement. That would create jobs as well, surely. What's your view?
It would. Yes, it would. I mean, Scotland's one of the few countries that's got masses of arable land fit to be developed.
Yeah.
After the clearances, those that didn't go to Canada or Australia were filed on top of each other in tenements in Glasgow. When the Duke of Hamilton had all the nice green luscious ground around Glasgow. And Edinburgh, it's the Duke of Buccleuch that owns the best land around the city. So I think that's a rather good idea, that and lots of other holidays and a 4-day week. I've always thought that. And as long as the young people are prepared to look after we elderly, like the Japanese do, and don't send us off to these privatized care homes where you get the coronavirus as well as watery custard on your cake.
Let me share. Thank you for that. Let me share a couple of thoughts from various fans who've written in. Lynn Woods she says, "I'm in remission and I'm sending empathy, and I guess sympathy as well." Alba Dave on Facebook says, "Gareth, we are all devastated to know that we won't be graced with your grumpy self on Twitter."
It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
He says, "My question is this. Have you thought about trying to rejoin the SNP?"
No, I wouldn't do that. I wasn't a member when I was thrown out. If
You weren't a member?
No, I wasn't, no. The guy who made that stupendous blunder, Angus MacLeod, the National Secretary, a chap who obviously shows great strength of character, sufficient not to write and apologise, didn't seem to realise it, but they didn't know who I was. When the furore broke, he had no idea who it. Nobody had in the party had, which was terribly depressing. It was more depressing than being accused of something I'd never done. And if any of you are watching wonders what I'm talking about, I should say I was accused of being anti-Semitic. A difficult thing, since half the family are Irish, another half are Jewish. I've got a Beverly, a Michael, a David, a Jaime. I think I've got everything except a Shlomo in my family. And when I was younger, The rabbis used to visit me because they thought I'd make a good rabbi, and the local priest used to visit and stare at me for ages. To my guardian, no, that boy looks as though he's made for the Catholic Church. In fact, my wife has said that, especially when she gets really annoyed with me. God, you could have been a priest. Get out of my way, You should have been a priest. So I don't know what I'm talking about here, but I'm just trying to tell you that all my life I've deferred to other people. There's something in me that made me do it. I've never psychoanalyzed myself. I don't have that ego.
Yeah.
A Scot, most Scots are practical people. I like to do things. I like to build things. And being half Italian, I'll build anything. The Romans built wherever they went, they built things. I mean, my house is on Roman archaeological ground, 10 feet away where the 2,000 Roman garrison used to sit, in Cramond in Edinburgh. And I'm very close to J.K. Rowling, just down the road.
Oh, my word.
How about that for one-upmanship? Except I call her J.K. Rowling in it.
I'm trying to picture this scene 2,000 odd years ago. These Romans in Cramond. It's hard to see that as a plum assignment somehow. I mean, no disrespect to Cramond. I love the place dearly.
Oh, no, you're right. They found the Romans used to have little postcards made of wood. And alongside Hadrian's Wall and in the Roman grounds near me, they found them. And it looks like black dots until you put them under some sort of radio microscope. And then suddenly up comes the Italian writing. And it says things like, oh, Mama, I want to go home. It's so cold here. So you're absolutely correct. And I've been finding bits of pottery and bits of glass. I had to build up. The house is on a promontory, and I had to build up one side because it's a slope. The damn land is worthless, when it's lying on its side. And so I had to build that flat. But in the doing, I found all these old bits of broken pottery. And when you go into London and the beautiful, the verdant parts of England start disappearing, and suddenly you get high embankments, and the oiks and the schemes have been throwing their mattresses and their dud fridges over the fence onto the railway embankment. Well, that's what these Romans did here. They threw, when anything broke, they threw it down the slope. And I've been digging it up ever since and cursing them. I was a bit worried just in case I'd found more than that, some beautiful bathhouse with a terrazzo still intact, or a skeleton, something like that. In which case, the council would have sent in the archaeological department and charged me $5,000 a month to pay their diggers, and I couldn't build the house.
I read somewhere once that most of the Roman soldiery that it's manned the Antonines Wall and perhaps Hadrian's Wall too. Well, not actually from Rome, but from the Roman provinces. I mean, other parts of Italy, Spain, North Africa.
Yes.
I mean, that must have been a bit of a shock to the system in terms of climate difference, to move from North Africa to the Antonines Wall. Anyway, I
made a documentary on the Italian prisoners who built the chapel up in Orkney.
Oh, right.
And I found one of the last living guards. And I said, look, we'll do a scene where you walk along the beach and you recount your time with the prisoners. And he was a retired dentist, a lovely man, and he had a pipe. And he walked along, and cameraman and I were backing and listening to him. And he was saying, well, he said it was freezing cold in the winters. We had to break these giant rocks. And Churchill told us to get them out there into the sea to build these barricades against the U-boats, the German U-boats coming through. And he said, I was away from my family and we were never fed. And I said, whoa, cut. And I sort of ambled up to him. I said, you're doing fine, but just forgive me for saying this. I said, was it not the Italians doing all that work? You just had to have a rifle over your shoulder and supervise them. And he took a long think and a puff out his pipe. And as the smoke went up, he gave a wonderful Scottish compliment. I will. I'll give them half of it. We Scots are not famous for our compliments. I learned that when I went to Los Angeles and Hollywood. Mr. Wydell, please, it's Wardell, but just call me Gareth. Gareth, we just love your voice and accent. And you said, who the hell is she talking to? Because you've had an inferiority complex about your Scottish accent all your life, which you've been trying to flatten. So you sound English and educated and gone to a good school with a good tie. Incidentally, I don't even own a suit, never mind a tie. I think I've got a black one for funerals, which I might have to wear myself quite soon.
So in addition to documentaries,
that was gallows humor, right? Documentaries. Carry on.
You shot the Proclaimers' first video. Is that right?
I did. Yeah.
They're from America.
Guys, yeah. I refused their agent when he first wrote. I'd already. I think I'd made by that point the political thriller. I hadn't made the film that I made in Scotland, and I pompously wrote back and said, "I don't do videos. I do major dramas." And then he sent me a tape. Said, "Please listen to this." And I heard these amazing, raw, uncompromising voices coming out. Whoa, you go. And I thought, any writers, any lyricists who can get metal in their lyrics, I'm going to invite them in, and I'm going to do their video. And I got to number 2, but I did tell them that the London boys would take over, and that work would stay in Scotland, and that's exactly what happened. As soon as I got anywhere in making films in Scotland, the London film, the English film industry, we Scots don't have one. We have a community of filmmakers, very talented ones, and the SNP have given us a 4-wall studio in Leith at last to use, but the money is in London, and as soon as I achieved anything, they shut down the funds. But funnily enough, just before I went to America, one of the biggest producers came to me to ask for a loan of money for his film. So I just sat there and looked at him and said, "Do I really look as stupid as you think?" How many times did I come to you, And I had my investment accountant with me, grabbing my hand and, "Don't alienate this chap, don't alienate him." And I said, "No. Why should we invest in him when he's refused every single project?" And the guy took a script on Glen Cole to one of the biggest producers in London with some of the biggest names attached to it. Alec Guinness, just before he died, "Dear boy, I would give my right arm to play in this script. You tell them I'm involved." And the producer said, "Who the hell wants to see a Scottish costume drama?" That was one year before Braveheart.
Yeah.
Nothing. And it's understandable. It's their culture. Why should they not develop and film and adapt their own culture? Why should they not make Pride and Prejudice for the 13th time? That's entirely up to them. I just object that they block our culture, and we've got no way to get it seen in cinemas, and the BBC doesn't allow us to transmit it. We are treated as a province.
Yeah. Another question.
Oh, no, another one.
Yeah, they're coming thick and fast here. And by the way, I apologize to folks who didn't get their question answered tonight. I know we're coming almost to the end, but we've tried to fit in as many questions as we possibly can. But my apologies if your question hasn't been asked. It's Robert Wilson on Facebook, and the question he's asking is this: will Wales be independent sooner or later?
I've always thought Wales is too close to London to get its independence quickly. They lost the Brexit vote, and it was one of the universities, Aberystwyth, did analysis, and they found that the vote had been swayed by the incomers, not by the Welsh. The Welsh voted that they wanted to stay in the EU. So they have a problem that they are geographically and economically and socially so close to London.
Yeah.
We're much further away.
Yeah.
And we know when we're being ignored.
Here's a thanks for that. Here's a question that came in by email earlier. It's from John Brown. He calls himself Broonpot.
Oh, yeah.
He's saying, well, he says, one of my favourite movie genre is the spaghetti westerns, Clint Eastwood's, Sergio Leone, etc. He wants to know what your favourite film genre is and why.
Well, I love the spaghetti westerns. When a student, I went out after seeing Clint Eastwood and bought a poncho and staggered around Glasgow and Byres Road in this point. You can laugh. Yeah, I'm quite eccentric, really.
Did you have the little cigar?
I hate smoking, but I made sure the long thin route there. Yeah, I met Clint Eastwood, which I must write about, and it was an outdoors event. I made him laugh by telling him that Mel Gibson's Wallace was the only man in Scotland who owned a razor. And then we walked to this big table with a buffet. The buffet had been laid out. And it was all chopped green and bread and brown lettuces, all that kind of stuff. And he was holding his plate, and I heard him say to me, "This meal looks like Jackson Pollock." That was so. I've got one story with him. The political thriller. I don't do academic thesis. I write screenplays, or I doctor screenplays that are in bad health that are sent to me. And that's what I'm doing now in my dotage. And the political thriller has, if written by a good writer, has tremendous power in illustrating what's happening around us, probably more so than buying a factual book written by an academic.
Yeah.
And that's what I did with Braun, which we set in Glasgow to show how Scotland's politics are manipulated. And it won an award in America for the best screenplay and was not subtitled.
Yeah.
Local Hero was subtitled. Set in Highlands. But Braun was not, and that was in full Glaswegian accent.
How do people get to see Braun if they want this? People want to see Braun.
I don't have a copy. I believe, I'm told it's on YouTube there, but I'm not sure. I think I saw a bit of it, and the quality looked poor.
Yeah.
It was a Channel 4 production. My film after that, about 5 unemployed guys who are out of work 1 year before Train Spotting. See, my instincts are good. The BFI, the British Film Institute, owned it, and I think they filed it away under, I don't know what category they'll find them. There's nothing whimsical about it, but it was political as well. Unfortunately, you'll not see anything made that's got any kind of political reference about anything in Scotland.
Yeah.
Not by any of the television companies, and most certainly not by any film production company. And the wonderful little company in Glasgow that made Outlaw King.
Yeah,
it's American money, and the talented director had already made a superb film in the American genre, and was given this chance to make a Scottish epic, which I enjoyed tremendously, as I did Braveheart. Yeah, absolutely. I love those films, and they just catch they catch your spirit. Same as any Englishman would love to see a film about Lord Nelson. Exactly the same emotion.
Now, going back to your activities on social media, you've got an essay site that attracts 50,000 readers a month worldwide. Is that right?
Yeah, when I add them all up, yeah. Maybe it's the same few. They just keep. I can't tell. There was one. I had a look. You look at your analytics, and one came in from Nepal, and I found myself writing, "Hey, I've just seen that somebody is reading my work from Nepal. Who the hell is that?" And up on the screen popped this photograph of a little guy about, I would say 11 or 12, in a yurt in Nepal with his open computer, laptop in front of him, saying, "It's me, Garris, it's me." And I wanted to kiss the guy. I said, "Oh, great to know. Please keep writing in." So, yeah, but I've got to keep the quality of writing high, haven't I? Yeah. The more people watch, the greater the responsibility. And I don't want to get into the habit where you just write for notoriety.
Yeah. Yeah.
I write because I hear someone has said something and it sparks something in my head, and I think, well, that's what people are thinking. Let me write this out to see if it makes any sense, and if it does, I put it on.
Well, I hope it keeps coming. And you've got your Twitter site has an average of 2.5 million readers a month. Is that right?
It's unbelievable. And I don't make a penny from any of these things. I don't have a fund, nothing. This is the last look. I'm still my last shirt, and I even put the buttons on it myself.
Come on, you're preaching to the choir. We don't get a penny for this either. This is done as you do. It's out of love, and
I have to get my wife to cut my hair.
And that's why we do it. I mean, the BBC is sitting there on top of 32 million pounds, and I like to think, in many respects, in terms of the quality of the guests, we do just as well as they do on a mere pittance. Look, this has been a fantastic interview. Thank you very much, Gareth. I wish you all the very best.
Thank you. I'm honoured that you should ask me, because I don't particularly think any more than I'm just a guy who writes interesting blogs with well-honed phrases.
There's precious few around, let me tell you. Thank you very much. And can I say to everyone watching and listening, obviously a big thanks to Gareth. And very importantly, please support Indy Live and Indy Live Radio. These guys do a phenomenal job. If you haven't accessed the material, please do so. And if you've liked the show tonight, please, if you can find some money, do send them something as a contribution. Good night all. Thanks, Gareth.